What's up, everyone? Between my Pragmata sessions, I've been spiraling down a family Manhwa rabbit hole. I stumbled across something top tier that is a total breath of fresh air. So, without wasting any more time, let's get started. The story opens on a picturesque, snowy Christmas Eve, where the holiday cheer is practically suffocating. A picture perfect family strolls through the city, with a little girl practically bouncing off the walls with festive excitement. Walking past them is our protagonist, a brooding young man in a dark winter coat who looks like he completely missed the memo on holiday joy. He feels totally alienated by the festive crowds and the universal happiness around him, deciding it's best to just head home and escape the seasonal cheer. His lonely stroll is interrupted when he spots a Wish.com Santa kneeling in the snow. The Santa has a little cup and a sign practically begging people to make a wish. Feeling a spark of generosity, or perhaps just pity, our guy pulls out his wallet and drops a crisp bill into the cup. Immediately, he realizes he has made a terrible mistake. The Santa aggressively snatches the protagonist's hand with the grip strength of a desperate barnacle. The old man is overwhelmingly grateful and absolutely refuses to let go, demanding that the young man make a wish. Our hero is thoroughly creeped out and desperately tries to yeet his hand back, internally lamenting his terrible luck with weirdos. The street Santa doubles down, claiming he is literally locked out of Santa Village until he grants this kind stranger's wish. Realizing that humoring the man is his only ticket to freedom, the protagonist relents. He makes a surprisingly sincere and heartfelt wish. I want a wife as sweet as a rabbit and a daughter as cute as a mongoose. Our boy doesn't know it yet, but this Santa doesn't just say, ho, ho, ho. He also provides hoes, and he decides to grant our boy's wish with a little too much enthusiasm. Understandably terrified by this demonic Kris Kringle, our protagonist rips his hand away and absolutely books it down the street. He sprints away from the scene, completely convinced the man is insane, while the Santa screams, supportive, unhinged promises after him into the snowy night. Having successfully escaped the weirdest street encounter of his life, the exhausted protagonist boards a crowded, noisy subway train. Slumping into a seat, he stares longingly at a train advertisement featuring a smiling, perfect family. He closes his eyes to rest, mentally resigning himself to just wanting a normal, happy life like everyone else. Unfortunately for him, the universe is already setting his sarcastic wish into motion, as a strange, ominous purple mist begins to materialize in the darkness, signaling that his custom-ordered family might be arriving sooner than he thinks. Following his mysterious purple smoke subway abduction, our protagonist wakes up with a headache that feels like a hangover from another dimension. The bad news? He's in another world. The worst news? He's trapped in a wooden cage being dragged by a wagon, and nobody even said, "Oh, you're finally awake." Wearing nothing but his boxers, he starts to panic, realizing he wished for a stunning wife, but ended up as a buy one, get one free slave. Beside him, a rugged bearded man silently observes him, while a blonde prisoner covered in scars shares the cramped space. Looking around, our boy concludes that the vibe is very Middle Ages. Curious, he peeks outside and sees armored soldiers walking alongside the wagon, speaking a language that definitely isn't on Duolingo. Piecing together the foreign gibberish and the medieval setting, he arrives at a wild conclusion. He's been Isekai'd. Struggling to process the fact that he has no Wi-Fi, he curls up on the floor, trying to remember how to breathe. His attention shifts to a motionless prisoner in the corner, making him wonder if the guy has already checked out permanently. Carefully, our boy reaches out and touches the man's shoulder, whispers a quick, "My bad," and proceeds to steal the dead man's clothes. Exhausted, he lies back, recalling Santa's bizarre promise to grant his wish. Staring at the ceiling, he questions if he ever actually knew what happiness felt like. Time passes, and he loses track of how many days he's been stuck in this mobile prison. The wagon moves endlessly through dense forests, and he eventually realizes that everyone in the cage is being transported to find a buyer willing to pay for human lives. Finally, the sound of a lock opening breaks the silence. The prisoners are lined up like groceries as a village chief inspects them. Even though his pride is in the gutter, our boy feels a spark of hope. He figures since he's been hitting the gym, he'll be a top-tier pick and escape the wagon quickly. But reality hits him like a sack of bricks. After getting rejected by several villagers in a row, his face goes blank. Imagine being so mid that you can't even get hired as a slave. That's a new level of depression. As the wagon moves on again, he lies on the floor, wondering how his life reached this 0 stars, would not recommend rating. He remembers his mom telling him to live life to the fullest, but right now, he's just full of regret. Closing his eyes, he wonders if he can survive this ordeal. The image of Santa's creepy smile lingers in his mind. Pushed to his limit, he curses this happiness and rejects both worlds entirely. He's ready to give up on everything to stop the pain, but then his deep-seated desire for a beautiful wife resurfaces, giving him a reason to keep grinding. Just as he finds a bit of calm, a piece of fresh bread is poked through the bars. A kind, gorgeous woman is standing before the cage, offering food to the prisoners. As she places the bread in his hands, a small girl peeks out from behind her skirt, looking at him with wide eyes. Surprised by this sudden act of humanity, he stares at the pair, completely illuminated by the sunlight. The scene shifts to a serene, sunlit cabin tucked away in the forest. Inside, a young woman and an angelic little blonde girl share a very meager meal at a wooden table. Noticing the child eating carefully, the woman selflessly slides her own bowl across the table, encouraging the girl to eat more. However, the sweet child refuses to take it, softly pointing out that if she is hungry, the woman must be starving too. Touched by the little girl's pure empathy, the woman warmly agrees that they are in this together, and they decide to share the humble meal equally. This brief moment of domestic peace is violently shattered by loud, aggressive pounding on the cabin door. It's the village elder, who doesn't even bother coming inside to deliver his terrible news. He casually announces that the local village council has played unwanted matchmaker. They have officially decided to force the woman to marry one of the newly arrived slaves. To make matters worse, she is ordered to put on her best clothes and report to the village entrance by dawn, to be dragged back up the mountain with her new husband. Once the elder leaves, the cabin is filled with a suffocating tension. The woman clutches the little girl in absolute terror, spiraling into a panic attack. She is absolutely petrified of being forced up the mountain to face physical abuse once again. While the urge to run away is strong, she realizes escape is practically impossible. More importantly, as she looks down at the child beside her, she knows she can never just abandon her to face the dark alone. However, her quiet moment of resolve is suddenly interrupted. As if sensing the heavy, terrifying atmosphere in the room, the little girl's massive eyes well with tears. She looks up and bursts into loud, heartbreaking sobs right then and there, her wails echoing helplessly through the bleak, empty cabin. As she watches the little girl sleep, clutching a teddy bear, the woman's mind drifts to her own incredibly tragic backstory. Talk about a raw deal. She recalls how her own father sold her off for the ridiculously low price of a single rabbit pelt. Her arrival at the cabin was nothing short of a horror story. On the very first day, she met her arranged husband. Before she could even unpack her single, tiny bundle of belongings, the monstrous man brutally beat her simply because she arrived slightly later than scheduled. As she lay bruised and battered on the floor of that hellhole, the only comfort she received was from the man's young daughter, who gently approached to console her. But hey, the universe occasionally serves up some delightfully swift justice. That very same day, the horrible husband went out to the hunting grounds and was promptly devoured by the local wolves, leaving nothing behind but a bloody boot. While his transition into dog food was undeniably a massive relief for the woman and the child, it left the two of them entirely alone, bound by shared hardship and facing a terrifying, uncertain future. To set the stage, the woman reflects on the harsh reality of her village. A widow without a husband is essentially a defenseless sheep wandering outside a protective fence. Her relief over her abusive husband's death by wolf mauling is heavily overshadowed by the crushing anxiety of what will happen to her and the child next. Returning to the present, she and the little girl are walking hand in hand through the village under the bright sun. The child points excitedly at a large wooden carriage in the middle of the area. She probably isn't thinking about cheap labor. She's just a kid excited by a big, flashy wagon. The woman looks over and gets a shock when she sees the protagonist locked inside. However, Seeing the caged man doesn't just spark simple pity, it triggers a violent, traumatic flashback. She is suddenly pulled back to a memory of her deceased husband, physically abusing her, shattering plates, and viciously berating her for ruining his appetite, while she cowers on the floor, shielding the terrified child. Shaking off the nightmare, she looks at the starving, humiliated prisoner and feels a deep, unspoken solidarity. Breaking through the protagonist's spiral of shame and insignificance, the young woman steps up to the iron bars. Her gentle, warm gaze cuts through his despair as she offers him a small woven basket of bread. Before he can even process this angelic act of kindness, the moment is ruined by the local village chief and another man who step in to shoo her away. They order her to return to her cabin and leave the business to them. She obediently walks away, and the little girl peeks over her shoulder for one last, sympathetic look at the prisoner. Once they are gone, our boy absolutely inhales the bread in silence, desperate for any nourishment. His meal is quickly interrupted by armored soldiers who unlock the cage, drag him out without an ounce of ceremony, and toss him face first into the dirt. It is time for the official paperwork. The village chief and the soldiers gather around for a bizarre ritual. A heavily armored knight grabs the hand of other slaves and slices it open with a dagger, letting their blood drip onto a strange leather document. The parchment immediately glows with an intense blue light, leaving our exhausted hero deeply startled and wondering if he has just witnessed real magic. After observing the glowing contract, the knight whispered to the elder about something, and then the elder looks at our boy. With the blood ritual complete, the glowing contract is handed over to the grumpy village leader, officially sealing the deal. The soldiers then leave our protagonist kneeling in the grass. The scene shifts back to the young woman, where a large, heavy sack of provisions is unceremoniously dropped onto the floorboards. A stern but pragmatic, older village matron orders the young woman to take the supplies with her. She explains that the village is providing them with this food and basic necessities to help them get by for a little while. However, there's a catch. It is strictly a loan, and they will eventually have to pay it all back. The matron then gives the young woman the full rundown on her newly assigned partner. First, she warns her that the man doesn't speak a single word of their language, so communication is going to be a major struggle. Furthermore, the soldiers who processed him suspect he is nothing more than a powerless commoner. But the matron quickly offers a massive silver lining to calm the young woman's nerves. She points out that while the man's face might look a bit rough and rugged, his hands are surprisingly soft. To the matron, this lack of heavy calluses strongly indicates he has never done a day of brutal labor, and more importantly, he has probably never hit anyone in his life. She assures the young lady that she can finally relax, as he definitely doesn't seem like the type to raise his hand against a woman. Being bluntly honest, the older woman reveals exactly why the village intervened in the first place. It turns out the entire town absolutely despised the young woman's dead husband. The only reason they ever tolerated the awful man was out of sheer necessity. He was the village's sole hunter, and they desperately needed someone to range the dangerous forest. With him gone, the council simply decided to assign her a substitute husband. The matron suggests that as long as this new guy works hard and takes up the hunting mantle, the young woman might actually get to live a comfortable, stable life. Overwhelmed by her traumatic past and terrified of the unknown, the young woman passionately replies that she isn't hoping for luxury or a comfortable life. Clutching her hands to her chest, she confesses that she doesn't care about living well. All she truly wants is a normal, non-violent man who won't hurt her, so she and her little girl can simply exist in peace. Her desperate pleas are eventually cut short by aggressive, loud knocks at the cabin door. The woman instantly panics, clutching her child tightly as an elder demands entry. The door swings open to reveal the elder acting as the world's pushiest matchmaker, dragging our bewildered protagonist inside the cabin. Inside, the boy stands awkwardly, trying to process his new reality as a purchased slave, while the woman and her daughter cower on the floor in absolute terror. She stares up at him, her heart racing as she assumes this towering stranger is going to be just as terrifying as her last husband. As our boy looks down at his terrified new family, a light bulb finally goes off. He recognizes her as the incredibly kind woman who offered him bread through the cage bars earlier. It seems our boy has indeed found his baddie, but his relief is quickly replaced by concern when he notices she is trembling uncontrollably in fear. Before he can even attempt to comfort her, the overly enthusiastic village elder intervenes, complaining that the two of them are standing way too stiffly for an engaged couple. The old man grabs the boy by the arm and hauls him over to the cowering woman. Without asking either of them for permission, the elder abruptly snatches both of their hands and mashes them together, proudly declaring that they finally look like a real couple. Having done his good deed for the day, the matchmaking elder leaves, stranding the two of them in an incredibly tense and awkward hand-holding session. Standing there looking at this beautiful, terrified woman, our protagonist's mind suddenly flashes back to that fateful, snowy night. He remembers the psychotic street Santa screaming about finding him a wife with a pure heart and a beautiful daughter who will respect her father. He looks at the woman's face, comparing her fragile innocence to a cute, defenseless white rabbit. Then he looks down at the sweet little girl, comparing her to an equally adorable, wide-eyed woodland critter. Whether it's a mongoose, a squirrel, or a quokka, the cuteness is off the charts. As the sheer irony of the situation hits him like a freight train, he realizes the terrifying truth. That crazy Santa was the real deal, and he actually granted his wish perfectly. Inside the cabin, the two women remain huddled together, absolutely terrified of the towering stranger before them. Meanwhile, our boy is completely lost in his own frustrations. He reflects on the sheer absurdity of his situation, angrily wondering why granting a simple wish for a family required kidnapping him and throwing him into another world. A dark, fiery red aura of sheer resentment literally begins to radiate from him as he makes a solemn vow. If he ever crosses paths with that deranged street Santa again, he is definitely going to kill him. Unfortunately, he doesn't realize his intense, murderous aura is scaring his new family half to death. The next day, our protagonist finds himself following two local villagers deep into the sunlit forest. Unable to understand a single word they are saying, he's just trying to go with the flow. Suddenly, one of the villagers turns around and extends a hand. Confused, but trying to be polite, our boy accepts what he thinks is a simple greeting. However, the villager maliciously squeezes down with a crushing grip. Assuming this is some sort of rough, local test of strength, our boy refuses to be intimidated. Tired of being underestimated in this new world, he squeezes back, instantly crushing the man's fingers with a loud crack. The villager drops to his knees, screaming in agony. Seeing our boy squeeze the other guy's hand, the elder is impressed and nods in approval, then happily hands him a wooden bow. Observing the weapon, our boy realizes the elder wants to teach him how to hunt. Right on cue, a cute little white rabbit hops into a nearby bush, completely unaware of the danger. The elder frantically points at it, demanding an immediate shot. There is just one problem. Our boy has literally never held a bow in his life. Nervous, he pulls the bowstring back, trying to remember what Olympic archers look like on TV. Suddenly, as his stance stabilizes, the arrow begins to glow with an intense, blinding, blue, magical aura. He releases the string, and instead of a normal shot, the arrow fires like a devastating magical laser beam. It blows a massive, smoking trench straight through the forest floor. The rabbit, completely unharmed by the weapon of mass destruction that just missed it, casually hops away. Both the elder and our protagonist are left squatting on the ground, utterly speechless at the absurd, explosive power. Still in shock and trying to process his unexpected magical abilities, the forest goes quiet. He then notices his new wife and the little girl approaching calmly through the trees carrying a basket. Seeing them, his heart skips a beat as he takes in the sight of his new family. The hunting lesson takes a pause as the women lay out a blanket on the grass. Soon, they are all sitting together for a simple picnic on the ground. As the woman gently feeds her daughter, she timidly offers him a warm bowl of stew. He accepts it, quietly eating his meal while observing the fragile, beautiful family that fate has inexplicably given him. While quietly eating the bowl of hot stew, the protagonist reflects on his incredibly lonely past. He realizes that from middle school until he turned 33, waking up entirely alone was the only reality he had ever known. Looking at the woman and child sharing a meal, He marvels at the fact that he finally got the family he always wished for, even if the method was completely twisted. Letting go of his previous anger, he looks up at the sky and silently thanks to Santa for giving him a family to protect. So much for seeking revenge on the street, Santa. The journey home continues along a bright forest trail. Our boy leads the way carrying a massive, heavy sack of supplies on his back, while the exhausted woman and child struggle to keep up behind him. Thinking about how a true protector must immediately jump into action, he stops walking and turns around to help them. He crouches down to their level, gently telling them not to be scared because he is going to hold them for a moment. Unfortunately, because he doesn't speak their language, his sudden approach terrifies them. The little girl begins to cry, and the panicked woman begs him to spare the child, desperately offering to do whatever he wants to keep her safe. Realizing they are misunderstanding his intentions but unable to explain himself, he politely says, "Pardon me for a moment." He reaches out and smoothly scoops the startled little girl into one arm, and then effortlessly lifts the shocked woman into his other arm. Now carrying both of them plus the giant supply sack on his back, he stands up with absolute ease. The woman is left completely stunned and speechless as he casually tells them to hold on tight and resumes walking down the trail. As he moves forward, our boy is amazed by his newly acquired physical strength. He notes that even while carrying all the luggage and 2 human beings, the load doesn't feel heavy at all. Filled with a new sense of purpose, he firmly resolves to learn the local language and figure out how to hunt properly so he can fill their new home with meat. Sensing his gentle nature, the young woman's tension finally melts away. She rests her head comfortably against his chest and firmly grips his shirt with her hands. Feeling her subtle, trusting squeeze, our boy continues their walk through the forest in a peaceful silence. After being guided through the woods by an older villager, our protagonist finally arrives at his new residence. However, calling it a home is a massive stretch. Staring at the crumbling wooden structure with gaping holes in the roof, he realizes this shack is probably going to be even colder than his drafty old rooftop room back on Earth. Naturally, he absolutely hates the cold, making this a less than ideal real estate situation. Pushing the creaky wooden door open, he steps inside, expecting at least a basic shelter. Instead, he is left completely confused, while his young wife is absolutely horrified by the scene before them. Tears instantly stream down her face, prompting our boy to gently ask why she is crying. Overwhelmed by despair, the desperate young lady turns and runs out of the shack. Standing in the doorway of the completely empty living room, the grim reality of the situation hits the protagonist as he realizes the place has been looted. However, it is the young woman who breaks down and voices the full, devastating extent of the theft. Collapsed on the grass outside, she tearfully explains that while she was away dealing with the village business, the opportunistic locals came and completely ransacked the house. They stripped the place bare, taking the supplies, the tools, the hose, the hammers, and even the hunting bow and arrows. The situation is extremely critical. Without any tools to repair the drafty walls, they are going to freeze as the weather gets colder. And worse, without a single weapon left, they have absolutely no way to defend themselves if a wild beast decides to attack right now. Walking out into the yard, he finds the young lady collapsed on the grass, crying uncontrollably over their doomed fate. To calm things down, he quietly sits beside her on the ground. In a tender, friendly gesture, he reaches out and gently pats the top of her head. Softly, he tells his startled wife not to worry, promising that she won't ever have to sleep out in the cold. Radiating calm confidence, a warm smile forms on his face as he looks into her teary eyes and assures her, "I'll protect you." The young lady's mind is still a whirlwind of cruel doubts and crushing anxiety about surviving in this hostile environment. Yet even though they don't share the same language, his affectionate, grounded presence works a tiny miracle. As the dread slowly fades from her eyes, she looks up at the giant stranger and silently wonders to herself, with so much to fear, why does she feel so incredibly relieved just being beside him? That's all for now. There are 8 chapters out, 7 are in English, and the 8th was just released in Korean. If you're interested, the title is in the comments and description. See ya.